Good morning, High Desert Center for Spiritual Living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Good morning. On Paradise Boulevard in Paradise Hills. It's like Disneyland. It's the happiest place on earth, but even better. It is. It is. So I went to see Ama Luna, which is one of the Cirque du Soleil. And have you ever seen them like fly around the room? I actually saw David Copperfield years ago, and he really did fly. And he made it rain inside the building too. But the Cirque du Soleil people, what they would do is they'd come out and they would have their peacock feathers and they would tickle people. And you know how they come through the audience before the program starts? And sort of like spirit. Spirit just comes through and sort of you have this tickle, you have this urge. This divine urge that just is this, what that influx is, or that which is always that divine essence. And so there was these characters, and they would have all these kinds of peacock feathers, and they would be flying and doing their gymnastics. And they were, at the very beginning, it was kind of like being on an airplane. And they were directing people and said, in case of an emergency, remain calm. And sort of pointing at the exits and all that. And by the way, if you'll say, Om, remain calm, and say Om, should there be an emergency. You want to try that? Om. This is good. Let's do that again. Om. So we can remember during our daily life, that we can remain calm and to Om, in essence, and to stay calm. And there, can you imagine, 2,452 people, I counted them all, saying Om. And so there's that spiritual revelation, which either there's that way out. We were looking for the way out where those emergency exits were. And a lot of us in our lives are looking for a way in. We're looking for a way into our spirituality. We're looking for a way in to that perfect relationship. We're looking for a way in to our prosperity. And I'd like to suggest and invite us today to know that we're living from within outward and never from without inward, which is something that Dr. Ernest Holmes, who's the founder of Spiritual Living, said. That we're living life from within. So we may be looking for a way out. And what the Ama Luna, the Cirque du Soleil people, invited us to do, it was in this mysterious island which was filled with beauty and courage. And as we move forward into the new year, we can in essence be tickled by that. And their queen was Prospera. And what she did was had this daughter who was coming of age, and so she was having a ceremony for her so that she could experience that mutual love, and she could experience that rebirth and renewal and balance. And wouldn't we all like some of that for the new year? Some renewal and rebirth and some balance. And to know that there's harmony in the process of doing that. And there was some kind of a storm that was caused, and there was a group of men that came forward to court her daughter. And so much like us courting the presence, we can have that experience of experiencing a mutual trust and a mutual love and faith and harmony. And that's what the Ama Luna was about. Does this sound familiar as far as a story that we could all live as having a rebirth and renewal into the new year, and knowing that there's harmony and trusting in that universe? And it could be in how I treat people. It could be how I treat people at work, how I treat people at home, how I treat people in the line at the bank, how I treat people I've learned what the big I was this week. I didn't know we had a big I. Where 25 and the 40 freeway meet. Someone turned me on to that. And it could be that when I grab a cup of coffee at Satellite, and I may have some moaning or something that's hindering me as far as what my measurements are about that cup of coffee. And French roast, it might be that compared to Sumatra, it might be like a 3. Or that cup of coffee might be like a 4. Or that experience might be whatever that scale is. And so could be that we have this stack of of cards. And for me to be in relationship when I show up, I want to see that I'm having that best experience possible, and not necessarily moaning or negating or measuring those things, rather than to just experience that rich cup of coffee and know what flavor is my preference. Because we all have these preferences, and so what I know is that spirit shows up in that moment. And I could say, well, maybe that Sumatra it could have been better. It could have been organic and free range and GMO free and bird friendly and funded by microloans and all those sorts of things. So there's that spiritual experience. So spirit shows up in the moment, like that cup of coffee or like that experience with the Cirque du Soleil. It shows up in the moment. And if I'm living in the past, the future has its shoulds, how it should be, how it ought to be. The shoulda, coulda, woulda, how it ought to be. And then the past also has that shoulda, coulda, woulda, or that ought to have been. Ought to have been. So I don't want to be a have been or a has been. I want to be living in the now, much like our book of the month talks about, the Stillness Speaks, living in the present moment of now, and show up fully as that presence. And so sometimes I'm too busy to have an experience of it, of the thing itself, because I'm talking about how it shoulda, coulda, woulda, hadda been, hadda, woulda been, hadda, coulda, woulda been. Kind of sounds like ordering at Starbucks. I don't know. Latte. Hadda, coulda, shoulda, woulda been latte. But as we have that practice, we've been in a year of spiritual practice. We know that we have this interconnectedness and this oneness that we can rely upon, the oneness that Mike talked about, that there is only one. Or as I like to say, that we're all one under the sun. Kwanzaa rolled around last Friday, December 26th, and it lasts until the New Year's Day, until January 1st, and it has values. It's a wonderful African-American tradition that's become universally celebrated by really many faiths and many cultures. The first day has to do with umoja, which means oneness. It means unity. And it's wonderful and it's powerful because what it does is it reminds us of the cornerstone of our philosophy, the science of mind, which is a guide for spiritual living. It reminds us of this profound principle and practice of oneness in our life. And it's a true cornerstone. We can rely upon it. And so it shows up in Christianity, it shows up in Islam and Judaism, that there's only one God. And that God is the one place, and be ye none that's before him. And as Ernest Holmes says, that there is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect, and that life is my life now. And we can have that be in our rebirth and renewal into the new year, have that be something, a phrase that we live and accept and embody. Or as Bob Marley says, there's one God, one life, one love, one earth. Some people are singing, one people. And it's that we're all one under the sun. Eckhart Tolle talks about true freedom. That true freedom is living in such a way as if you had completely chosen whatever you feel or experience at this moment. Wow. That's something that can tickle us through the aisles and carry us through, that to live our life as if it is something that we've chosen. So I'm ready to travel again, and I'm choosing to do kind of a clockwise loop and visit some friends and family in Arizona. I'm going to fly south for the winter a little bit. And I'm recalling my last trip where I'd flown back, and one of the legs of the trip, I'd flown back from Sky Harbor Airport. I came, I rolled up my suitcase, and I sat down. And there was this lady who was just telling me how awful it was, how awful the oughta, gotta, wata, should be, could be, had been, or could have been. And I said, it's such a lovely day. I listened to her as I sat there, and I was plugging in my things and getting ready for my cattle, for the cattle call on Southwest. And it's so funny because I said, it's such a great day. I have had such a great time, and I'm looking forward to this. And it's such a great moment just being here in anticipation of this wonderful, I can't wait. I thought I was going to see it was when the balloons were here. And I thought I was going to see the balloons coming back in the airplane and everything. And so I was telling her about all the different colors and how loving people are and welcoming and all. And so she began to follow me because we were right adjacent in our line. And pretty much she didn't say anything else that was awful. Terrible, horrible, the no good, bad, very bad day, like Alexander. I just saw this dollar movie. And what's interesting is then she started to follow me. I went to sit down and she started to follow me, and she's like a little more of that. It's just, she was just a little bit more, like kind of, and so we were together and pulling up in the line and giving our boarding pass, and it was like just wanting to kind of just nuzzle up to that positive kind of stuff. And you can imagine what we are. It just exudes who we are. Something speaks very loudly. And so at that, I don't think that suffering is necessary. It could be that pain happens in our life, but suffering could be more optional. And that lady at the airport chose to continue to suffer. So I think our complaints sometimes keep us from our spirituality. So we all know how to meet God and how to connect and how to commune. We did that on Wednesday night. We know that we're already connecting and we're reconnecting all the time. But do we want to dive a little bit deeper? We all know how to do that, right? We can stop resisting. And what that lady did was stop resisting. And so did Alexander in the movie of the horrible, awful, terrible, really bad, ugly, no good day. Alexander and his family, he was an 11-year-old, and the movie starts out and he's got gum, like stuck in his, have you ever had gum? Not even on your shoe, but he, takes the clippers and he clips it off himself, and then he's got a really bad hair day throughout the whole movie. And what he finds out is that he's not alone, that his family is having some trials and tribulations and some challenges. And at the same time, Steve Carell, everyone likes Steve Carell, and then Jennifer Gardner. Steve Carell talks about positivism. Wait a minute, let me try that again. I'm going to buy a vowel. Okay. Positivism. We're all going to remember that, right? You want to say that? Positivism. And so Steve Carell comes to his rescue, and they, in essence, the whole family stands by each other in the midst of whatever those circumstances were going on. And like his older brother, they were out of his tux for his junior prom, and so he's wearing like this awful baby blue tuxedo, and he was going to pick up his girlfriend, but he fails his driving test, and just a whole series of things. So he couldn't have way too much fun at the prom because they didn't have a car to go in. And then the mother had a real failure. Oh, Dick Van Dyke again. Remember, he was here last week too. Dick Van Dyke was to read Jennifer Gardner's book. She was working for a publisher company, and it had a big typo in it about, I'll save you the suspense, but it had a big typo which actually became even more beneficial as far as publicity for him. And so she was running on a bicycle trying to catch the guy Dick Van Dyke from reading the typo. But it was to her benefit. And she got a promotion to vice president and all this kind of stuff due to a mistake, which coulda, shoulda, oughta, woulda been a coulda latte for her. And Stephen Carell he actually caught on fire. Has anyone seen Alexander, this movie? You got to go. It's at the Dollar Flick. And so he spills some stuff on his shirt, and he ends up, because his daughter was ill and she was Peter Pan, talk about flying around the room. I love the synchronicity. So she was flying around the room, and then he went ahead and he got a costume shirt, but he had a job interview. And then he also had the little baby boy, too, at the job interview. And what happened was they had this subsequent interview at one of those Japanese restaurants where they cook the food in front of you. You want to make sure you don't get the ones that have the Band-Aids when you sit down. You want to make sure you get to the other table. But anyways, I'm having fun today. Are you having fun? It's a new year. It's a new year. We're going to be joyful. We're in a new design for living in 2015. So Stephen Carell has this pirate shirt because that's all he had to wear to this interview, and he catches on fire at the Japanese restaurant. But what happened was they thought he was so much fun. It was this young group of gaming. He was actually a PhD rocket scientist who was interviewing at this gaming company to design this new satellite game because he had all this technology. They thought he was so much fun because what he did was he wore the pirate shirt, had fun at the Japanese restaurant, caught on fire, and then put the fire out by dipping in a fish tank. Can you imagine? But they thought they were so much fun. So not only did Jennifer Gardner get to be the vice president, that he then got to have a job. And he'd been unemployed for, I couldn't remember if it was 5 months or 5 years maybe, but he was a FOMMY. He was a father who was a mommy for quite a while. I'd never heard of FOMMY. So they were having their own perfect life, and Alexander realized that he wasn't alone in that journey. And they all stood by each other and knew they were connected in the one, and they had a good time in spite of what was going on. We have a chance to experience more peace in our heart this Wednesday, December 31st. And it's a lot to get up and meditate in the comfort of your own home with hot chocolate and fuzzy slippers. It's a lot to get up before 5 a.m. And if you want to go out and get the World Peace Meditation, it's in your bulletin. I met John Randolph Price way back in the 80s, in the inception at Greenwich noontime in 1986. He put it out there that everyone around the world would be having a World Peace Meditation at the same time. And so it's carried on for 30 some years. And it's an incredible meditation, and I see a lot of people who are nodding their heads. We can carry that harmony and that balance and that peace into the new year, and also stay up late on New Year's Eve. So it's easy to remember. And by the way, it's talking about Greenwich noontime. I was finally able to, with the time change one of all my clocks. It took a little while, but I was able to adapt. They're no longer on Greenwich noon mean time. So I know that there can be an experience of mutual trust and faith, much like the gal who was in the airport line, much like Alexander and his family, and much like me trusting that I knew how to change those clocks eventually. And there's a couple more stories. You ready? You ready? Okay. Because the topic today is suffering and the end of suffering, so we're gonna leave suffering behind in this year, and we're gonna know that whatever experience we're having, no matter what, we can bring peace to it, and we can choose. We can choose again. We can know that even if we're having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, we can have positivism, and that we can experience the great oneness of our own being. There was a daughter who came home. She wasn't related to Alexander's family, but she came home to her mother, and it was awful that her boyfriend had just left her. Her best friend was moving away. And it was just an awful, awful time. She was even failing algebra. Now that could be easy for some people to do, but she was failing algebra. So her mother was baking a cake. And she asked her, well, what can I do for you? How may I console you? How may I be compassionate? How may I be a caring presence for you? And her mother was baking a cake, and the daughter says, well, yeah, Mom, I love your cake. I would love to have some of your cake. So the mom says, great, have some oil. She says, ew, I don't want just some oil, ew. Oh, well, have some salt. Just a little, have some salt. Ew, I don't want just salt. Well, have some butter. Oh, I don't want to eat, oh my gosh, and I've heard that's really bad for you with cholesterol. I don't want to have butter, even though it tastes really good. What about a couple raw eggs? Oh, yuck. No, that's for like sports, Schwarzenegger kinds of guys. Yuck. Well, what about baking soda? Yuck, gross. I don't want just those ingredients. How about a spoonful of vanilla? Mom, it's all yucky. I don't want to eat those ingredients. But what she found is that if she mixes those ingredients when they're all together, like the all one, like the Spirit, when they're all together in the best way possible, it makes a delicious cake. So as we have those ingredients in our lives, we can add that to our melange of good deliciousness and know that we have not only the cake, but the icing on the cake. And Spirit works in the same way, that all things can work for good and be delicious and sweet. After a long incubation period, the New Zealand Kiwi chick faces a really tough time. So as we look at ending struggle, ending suffering, and moving into our joy, into the new year, the Kiwi chick faces an exhausting job of pecking his way out. And unlike other birds, he's kind of tall, and unlike other birds. And some people think New Zealand, in fact, a friend of mine had crewed for one of the America's Cup folks for the kiwis. We think it's for the kiwi fruit, but it's actually for the kiwi bird from New Zealand. So the kiwi has no egg tooth to break through the egg, unlike other birds. So there's no egg tooth to help the process, and he has to rely on his feet, which he's kind of tall, and his beak. And it takes him about 3 days to use his beak and to use his feet and to roll around and to get out. It takes about 3 days. And it's essential. I think if some PETA members were here, we would want to, go out and say how cruel maybe Spirit was in making this bird the way that it had to come to birth. Or we would write letters or whatever that would be, But for 20 minutes, the kiwi might jiggle this way, or it might even sleep during this process for 12 hours during those 3-day periods, because it's such a struggle to get out. And he flexes his muscles, and eventually there's a crack in the shell that appears. There's a crack, and there's some light, and there's that struggle that continues until that kiwi bird is free. Remember, Eckhart Tolle said that true freedom is living in such a way as if we had completely chosen whatever you feel or experience at this moment. That kiwi bird in that moment is having his spiritual experience. It's essential for that bird to be strong and to have it and have that experience until it pokes through. It pokes through and it lives. So why is there such a struggle? Perhaps there's certain muscles that are being developed. Perhaps there's that development of that spiritual being, that insight. And it's like putting those ingredients of that recipe, like that cake, that all those ingredients are necessary to be mixed up and to be one delicious experience of life. So I know that much like Cirque du Soleil, we can have that spiritual essence tickle our insight, tickle our deepening, and as we dive deep and as we rise higher and rise above those circumstances in our life. And that, yes, there can be an end to suffering, and that we can stop the complaints, we can keep knowing our joy. We can know that we are having this spiritual experience that is giving us this ability to break free in that strengthening and in that courage and in that faith and in that trust and in that harmony. Knowing that Spirit is working on our behalf and that all is coming together for good. And that cake is delicious and that suffering is optional. And so we can experience the positivism. You want to say that again? Positivism of this moment. So I invite us to just turn within and know that there is this beautiful place of love and light and joy. And it is that which is filled with gratitude and the abundant good. And I'm unified with this essence and presence and so very, very amazingly beautiful in this moment. It is love beauty, and it is true, and it is good. For this I am grateful, and so be it, and so it is. And I'd like to call up Tilia Giron, who has a ceremony for us. And to be in ceremony of the new year, she has some special treats for us.
Positivism here, folks. Well, I don't know if any of you noticed, and this is not in the script, but these two little guys came from Ashley. This is Blackie, and this is Whitey. And Whitey cannot sit up without Blackie. Why is that? Because we need it all. As Mike said, we are all one. It is all one. And as Dee spoke of the positivism that is present, so it is. They need to be together there. So it is that everything that exists in the oneness and in the loving Spirit. And so, while we may not always realize that everything that is in our lives is there for our good and for our spiritual evolvement, it is. So this being the time of year, the ending of one year and the beginning of another, it's a time when we often take stock. We reflect. We look at what we have created in our lives that is good and that we'd like to continue and that which we might like to change and transform. And so today, we will use some tools, blessed tools that are given to us out of the love of Mother Earth. And Mother Earth is just representative of that divine love that is here with us always to support us. And so when you came in today, I hope that you received one of the pathway stones in a little basket by the door. If you did not, I'd like to ask you to please get one. So these pathway stones, I'm going to ask you to honor them, for they honor you. They chose themselves to be a part of your pathway this morning. So implicit in the use of the stones is the idea that everything in creation is here for us, and it is only we to use them. In truth, we have everything we need within ourselves. So you will get two types of stones today. One is the pathway stone that you received at the door, and another, which is a stone that comes from the top of the sacred mountain. And they are both yours to keep and take with you and use any way you wish. Today, we are going to use them for listening, which will have part of our blessing, and for releasing and creating. So, I would like to ask you, if you would, to pause for a moment, take your pathway sacred stone in your hand, and listen. Listen in the silence to what the stone may have to tell you about anything. And the message you receive may come in the form of words, but it may not. It may come in the form of images, songs, body feel, anything. It could be memories. That stone chose you as much as you chose it. So now thank the stone and bless it, and know that whatever came or did not come to you, you and the stone can listen together later. Everything has its own time and its own place. And now I'd like you to take another moment, still in the stillness, and consider anything that you might consider to be something that you would like to release. Something that has a gift in it for you. It's just for you to see it. For everything exists for our own spiritual unfoldment. And invest that energy in the stone. Release it. That stone is there to serve you. So feel yourself hopefully becoming lighter. For you have just surrendered any resistance and hopefully are feeling lighter. For in truth, that perceived resistance was full of love. And so you are giving love as you release. And as you feel lighter, you feel love. You feel freer. And according to Thich Nhat Hanh, freedom is akin to happiness. So now that we've listened and released and been in that loving sweetness, let's turn our attention to what we might like to create in 2015. And for that, I am going to pass around some sacred mountain stones. While the basket is going around, I need to tell you something about the sacred mountain. It is an actual place, but the energy is absolutely transcendent. I find it beyond consciousness. It is really only awareness of the divine. It is there everything loses form. these stones, I think, are the most precious stones on the sacred mountain that she gave up to be here today with you. They're really from the bottom of the sea. And some of them are quite smooth, some are not. But they are her most cherished stones. And they represent great love. And so it is that you are to know that everything is here for your absolute benefit, beauty, upliftment, enhancement, expansion, development, and peace. Hawkins says that intention and attention moves the potential to the actual. Holmes and the great ones all say this. So having this affirmation, does everybody have a stone now that they'd like to use? And you don't have to use one. This is all choice. Something doesn't resonate with you, please feel free to opt out. No apologies. We all have our own paths. But if you'd like to take your stone into your hand and focus for just a minute on that which you find uplifting, rejuvenating, exciting, enhancing, deepening to your spirituality, please do so. Let's just have half a moment of silence for close on time. And feel yourself blend with the energy of the stone. It's here to serve you, as is all existence. It is all here, for we are all one. And the energy of the stone or the mountain or your secret oasis or place of personal, private sanctuary is all part of the pathway. Feel the love. This sanctuary itself is part of the pathway. We are all one, and we are one in that divine spirit. And these rocks are only tools, for you are the creator and the creatress. And truly, truly, all possibility is yours now and in this new year. Thank you. Merry Christmas. Namaste. Happy New Year.